Well, welcome back again this week. You know, everybody's concerned about 40 to 60,000 children coming across our border in Texas unaccompanied by adults. Now, there are several questions that arise in all of this. First of all, how come all these children are coming up from other countries than Mexico? Guatemala, Honduras, I think El Salvador is the third one, I'm not sure. And they're just coming alone. Now, doesn't it seem strange that all of these children, all at once, are coming to our border unaccompanied by adults? Number one, who tells them that they can do this? How are they able to cross territory on their own that is the equivalent of moving from Arizona to Canada, the distance? Would you, as a parent, allow your children to do that? If there are no parents down there with these children, that raises, to where they're coming north to look for their parents, that raises another question. But when I see things like this happen, almost always they're organized. Somebody is organizing this. They estimate that upwards of 90, perhaps 100,000 children will cross the border this year unaccompanied by an adult. They estimate that to double next year. Why? Why do they estimate that this is going to happen? They never quite say what it is that makes them give out these estimations. What do they know that they're not talking about? Very disturbing. Another disturbing aspect of it is they're concerned about 40 to 60,000 children. What about the million adults every year? Oh, they say it's gone down, and then it's back up, and then it's down. But they've been telling us for nearly a decade that the illegal immigration into the United States is 11 point whatever for that year million people. They have used that 11 million people figure for 10 years. Many people estimate that it could be as high as 30 million. Former border guards say it's somewhere between 18 and 20 million. So the government, like all the other figures they give us on zero inflation and that sort of thing, are false. Or how many people are out of work, how many people are on the dole. All these figures that come out of government, the immigration figures are just as false. And of course we see an additional problem, and that is, and they're intertied by the way, is that the march on Baghdad of the Sunni insurgents. Now, how are they related? Well, let's go to Senator McCain, for instance, and his Charlie McCarthy, Lindsey Graham, and see what they have done over the years relative to illegal immigration into Arizona and Texas and everything else. Demanding amnesty for these people, and so on and so forth, but demanding that we send troops here or there, or demanding that we do something overseas and get embroiled in more and more problems overseas. But along our border, we welcome the invasion. Doesn't that seem a little bit hypocritical? What is happening to our country is an invasion. If 11, let's use the government figure, if 11 million people crossed into our country armed and changed our country, we would be up in arms, as they say. But we aren't up in arms when 11 million people cross the country weaponless and do exactly the same thing, illegally. We either enforce the laws or we do not. We must enforce the laws. McCain gets up angrily on the floor of the Senate yesterday and demands that Obama do something. But he has no desire to do anything about our borders except when he's up for re-election. When these people are up for re-election, they're born-again conservatives. And then as soon as the election's over and they've fooled the American voter once again into re-electing them, they go back to their neoconservative things where they go and want to mess around in everybody else's backyard but won't take care of our own backyard. And it's a problem. You know, there's a lot more to this thing that's going on in Iraq than most Americans realize. It's not just simply a rebellion. They're not insurgents. They're not terrorists and so on and so forth in the sense of what we think of completely. Yes, they engage in terrorist activities and all the rest. But the Arabs, or at least the Muslims, let's put it that way because they're not all Arabs, fight one another. I know that there's a lot of arms buildup in the Middle East because of secular problems, secular conflicts, more than the desire to wipe out Israel. And I'm not saying that they don't all want to do that. But what I'm saying is that the Sunnis and the Shiites are going to be and already are at each other's throats. That plays a great deal into the situation in Libya, in Egypt, in Iraq, in Syria. And by the way, speaking of Syria, wasn't it a McCain that urged Obama to send all sorts of military aid to the rebels in Syria that now suddenly show up in northern Iraq and are marching on Baghdad with a lot of this equipment? You know, it's a funny thing that they fail to mention these things when they get up and give this speech or that speech or something else. They've always got us focused on that very narrow thing. Don't look at what we're doing in other areas because it'll show what hypocrites we really are. And so we arm the people out of Libya into Syria, and that's what was going on with our ambassador that got killed in Benghazi. He was arming the Syrian rebels, and others didn't like it. They've got these clashes, again, they're religious clashes as well as political clashes within these rebels. So we arm these people, and then we get surprised when they turn and use these arms in other areas. There are a lot of factors involved in this, not the least of which is Moscow. Don't forget, I've seen a lot of it in the papers lately, that al-Zawahiri, who is the head of Al-Qaeda, and depends on who you listen to, whether these people are break-off of Al-Qaeda or whether they're part of Al-Qaeda. It's the political bent of the commentator using these terms. But nonetheless, Al-Qaeda, which is now a huge organization across that area, is led by al-Zawahiri, and al-Zawahiri is a Russian asset. He was trained in Russia, and he became the second in command of Al-Qaeda under Osama bin Laden and took over the organization. So there's a lot of play in there with this as well. Iran is a Russian surrogate. And now Iraq, that we're supposedly worried about, is also allied with Iran, and Iran is now saying, we're going to send you military equipment and so on and so forth. They're debating whether to send troops to keep these Sunnis out of southern Iran. So when we see these things going on, that the Assad, the leader of Syria, is a Russian asset, Iran is a Russian asset, the people that we're concerned about, that McCain is concerned about now, that rule Iraq, are allies with Iran, a Russian asset, and it gets very muddied. And the thing is that we've just got to say, hey, wait a minute. Every time we get involved in these things, we make it worse. We just simply make it worse. Whether our troops are there or whether they're not there. We were lied to get into Iraq to begin with by Bush, not Obama. And Bush lied about the problems in Iraq. Al-Qaeda wasn't even in Iraq until we went in there and tweaked their nose enough until finally Al-Qaeda was able to recruit inside of Iraq and other areas as a result of it. And so this is the problem. When we get in there and start pushing people around, there will be a reaction, always. And it's none of our business. The area was stabilized. Yes, we had dictators there. There'll always be dictators there because they don't understand freedom. They don't understand a democratic republic. They don't want it, and society has to want it and has to work for it. Whatever government you have is based on the society that is there, if it is at all free. If it isn't free, then it doesn't matter. But what I'm saying is this, is the government you have will be based on the society that you have. I'm going to give a segment on that issue alone real soon here, because a lot of people in the conservative movement do not understand that concept. The morals of a community decide the society of that community, and that society will decide the system of government. You cannot escape that. Until next week, we'll see you then.